Hi, I'm Hannah Selinger, and I'm the author of Cellar Rat, My Life in the... I'll start again.
Take two.
Hi, I'm Hannah Selinger, author of Cellar Rat, My Life in the Restaurant Underbelly. I'm here on 50 Tastes of Grey, and I'm here to promote my book, and I hope you enjoy listening.
Did you enjoy Vegas?
It's funny, I hadn't been there in like 20 years. Probably about 20 years. And I actually have to go back in 3 weeks, but I was staying off the strip and it was very okay. But I think I'm about to have like a much different experience because I'm going to be with my family and we're going to do like very Vegas family friendly things. I didn't love that experience, but I was like, I flew right in, like did the book fair, and then I had to come out on a red eye. So it was like a fly by night. It wasn't the greatest Vegas experience of my life.
I blew off Vegas 15 or so years ago. I just never wanted to go back. It just felt so yucky.
Yeah, this one was a little bit like I wasn't staying at like a very nice hotel, and I didn't like do the food stuff that I'm normally invested in, and the like I don't know, it wasn't like I wasn't there to do that stuff. I was also very like work minded, and then I had like weird gaps of time, and then I didn't sleep very much. But the next time I'm going in with my family and we're driving, like we're flying into Flagstaff, doing the Grand Canyon, and driving to LA and stopping in Vegas for a night with my kids. So I think that'll be fun.
And we're going to talk a bunch about your book, Cellar Rat, My Life in the Restaurant Underbelly. But let's start off with a little bit of just like reveal stuff. Is that okay?
Sure.
Do you have a soft spot in your heart for spoons? Somewhere on the internet, I think I got that. What's that all about?
Yeah, I used to collect, and I still sort of do, airport spoons. They're harder to find these days, but when I was growing up, and actually starting, as I discovered in the 1800s, they used to make these little souvenir spoons that they would sell at airports that signified kind of the place that you were at. And I started collecting them when I was a kid, and then my father used to travel a lot for work, and so he would go to these random destinations that I had never been to, and he would bring me back a spoon, and then other members of my family would go to these far-flung places, and they would bring me back spoons. So I have a very large souvenir spoon collection, and now I do it with my kids. So when we travel together, we get them at flea markets, or when I'm traveling alone and I go to a place where they aren't able to go with me, I bring them back spoons.
Felt an immediate connection with you when I read about that because I've been collecting spoons my entire life.
It's a really fun thing, I think. Some people used to collect those tiny thimbles that they sold at airports. My parents saved them for me, and I still have them, and it was a nice thing to be able to kind of give to my kids who never met my father. He passed away almost 15 years ago, and so it was sort of a way to bring him and his travels, sort of pass that lineage on, I think.
I wanted to ask you, do you have any tattoos?
I have 2 tattoos.
Tell us about them.
One tattoo is actually my father's initials. They're on my right hand, on my right wrist, and I got them while my father was still alive, after he had been diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. Traditionally, Jewish people don't get tattoos, and it's kind of verboten. But he was really moved by it because it was sort of this permanent way of us being connected while he was alive, and also this understanding that, you know, it would be on me after he was no longer around. And the second tattoo I have is on my left arm, and it's a quote from one of my favorite books, Howard's End by E.M. Forster.
As part of the ongoing reveal, do you have your tongue pierced?
No longer.
No longer.
I did.
Okay, in your single days, I'm sure.
I had it pierced actually before I even turned 18, near where I live again and grew up, very close to the New Hampshire border. And in Salem, New Hampshire, you can kind of get away with anything. And I borrowed a friend's ID. She looked like me, and went across the border, and I got my tongue pierced. But it was actually starting to chip away and do some damage at the enamel, which I was warned about, actually. Unfortunately, I had to have that removed.
Right. Now, you say unfortunately. Would you still have it if you could?
Probably would. The one that I had to take out forever was my belly button ring when I got pregnant. They told me that was done for good. So
whole tongue piercing is kind of an interesting topic, isn't it? I have never encountered anyone with a tongue piercing, but is that what it's all about?
I mean, I think that when I was in the 90s, it was just sort of like a rebellion thing. And I had, my aunt was a speech therapist. She's a speech pathologist, actually, and I think she's retired. But she like went on this whole thing, like warning me that I was gonna forever like damage the muscle in my tongue, and then if I ever had a stroke, I was never gonna learn how to be able to speak again. And I sort of like rolled my eyes at her. But what actually happened had nothing to do with that. Although, to be fair, I haven't had like I haven't faced any neurological crises, so who's to say? But what really happened, and my husband actually used to have his tongue pierced also, and the same thing happened to him, which is that it knocked around on the backside of the length of the post hit the backside of my teeth, and it wore down the gum in a specific place so that it actually did permanent damage to the enamel on the backside, so that I actually may have to have gum surgery in my mid-40s. So that's the part that I wish I had known about, because that's actually quite uncomfortable, and it has done like nerve damage to a tooth that I didn't like. I was told all of these sort of like hyperbolic things about, well, if you ever have a stroke, and I was like, I don't know, am I ever really going to have a stroke? But really, it did damage to a tooth that was very preventable and real damage. So I wish I had known that part, I guess.
See, what's hyperbolic in your teens becomes reality. It's a whole different story many years later.
Yeah. Like when they tell you that you should really floss your teeth and you're like, I don't know, but guess what?
Oh, gosh. What have you eaten today, Hannah?
Oh my gosh. It's very, very embarrassed by what I've eaten today. I have eaten 2 pieces of baguette with butter, a bunch of candy that I stole from my kids because they went like mini trick-or-treating over the weekend, because trick-or-treating is no longer just one weekend or whatever.
Ooh.
It's like a whole month now. Welcome to 2025. And then I made, it's terrible. Also, I can't be trusted around Halloween candy or any candy.
Well, what are your favorites?
Like the worst possible things. Anyone else's people like good candy, and they think that just because I'm in food that I want like high quality candy. No, I want the worst candy options, like Airheads, Skittles, Starburst, anything that's made from pure sugar. That's what will satisfy me. So I ate Sweet Tarts and a blue Airhead, and there was something else that I ate. Now I don't remember what it was.
Really is the bottom of the barrel when it comes to candy, isn't it?
The worst stuff. The worst. Like, what's wrong with me? And then I ate a bunch of frozen dumplings from BJ's. While I was making onion soup, and the caramelizing of the onions took me like an hour and a half, and I like couldn't handle making something for a long time while not eating something else, so I made something quick while I was making something long.
Did you pan fry the dumplings, make them like a pot sticker?
No, I didn't even I boiled water. It's like the
just
laziest
wet
thing.
Noodles. You must have at least made a dipping sauce.
I boiled the dipping sauce that it came with while drinking a Diet Coke, which I'm still enjoying.
There's so many people feel so much closer to you now, knowing the kind of background that you have and seeing the kind of reality that you do to yourself.
I talked about this with somebody else recently, which is to say that like food people, like we do really love and care about food, but also like, sometimes you just actually, Lori mentioned something about this the other day about Tony Bourdain. It's like, sometimes you just want what you want. And sometimes what I want is actually just like careless, bad comfort food. And that's what I was, I was also preoccupied with making something that was like occupying a lot of my attention. And I had to really be on top of the stove. And we're going to have a nice dinner. My kids probably won't eat the onion soup because they hate onions, which is just something else I can't even discuss. I just wanted something that was like savory and hot, and it's raining here and it's cold. So I was like, what do I have that I can just like eat quickly that won't take up, that I can just do on this stove while I'm doing this and my hands are busy. And that was, easily controlled.
But the kids don't eat onions, even though onions are in everything.
I mean, sometimes sometimes they unwittingly eat onions. Like they'll eat onions in pasta sauce, if they're like undetectable, but yes.
Right. What are a few ingredients that are always in your fridge or pantry?
Onions are always in my pantry. Garlic is always in my pantry. I always have many different kinds and shapes of pasta, rice, and risotto, many different starches. There are always apples in my fridge, even though I personally hate apples because my children love apples. Lemons, soy sauce, many different kinds of olive oils, and oils in general. So many different kinds of vinegar, salt. And then we're sort of on a day by day basis. Like there's not, the produce I'm buying regularly, so that's seasonally based. We're switching over here in New England right now, so we're at a rough time. Like we're very much in our end of season last gasp. We're switching over into like root vegetable season, and then once we hit December we're like buying things that are probably coming from the West Coast and from
Right.
Florida, and then
Yeah,
it's grim.
it's difficult to eat locally when you're in poor weather systems.
Yeah. We were good. I shop at the farmers market through October. Our market will close at the end of October, and then we're just kind of feeling around and seeing what we can get. So, we've got grapes right now. We have some end of season melons. We've got a little bit left of the corn, although it's not great. We obviously have, potatoes, and we have some celery, and we have beets and tons of squash and pumpkins and things like that. And then, after Thanksgiving, we are in a dead zone until we hit basically the end of May.
Does hubby do any cooking, or is it pretty much all yours?
He grills and he follows instructions, but he's not the type to like creatively like make anything on his own.
Where did that whole thing come from where men grill?
I don't know. It feels very primal, doesn't it? Like they're like drawn to the fire. I don't love grilling myself. I'm perfectly capable on the grill. I don't personally love being burned. Like like the sensation of having fire touch my body. So I defer to him. Like if he wants, he's very uncomfortable with like touching a piece of meat and knowing when it's done. Whereas like I feel very comfortable in that domain. So he's like, got tools and thermometers and like gadgets, and I'm like, this is done. Just take it off. So that's sort of where we differ, but he very much needs like a plan and instructions. And I'm like, I don't know, like we're out of that one thing. So just don't use it or use this instead. I'm intuitive and he is not an intuitive cook at all.
Right. He likes the gadgets. And he likes dragging the woolly mammoth over to the grill. You heard about you being a foodie, and yet you love the crappy Halloween candy. What about wines? Because you being a sommelier in the past, do you drink just Boone's Farm sometimes, or what's your story with that?
I used to for sure. Old age will do that to you. I will say that I do drink some things that would probably surprise people. Like I drink, like we bought a bottle. We were at a local apple cider farm and made with alcohol that also was made with blackberries, and I was like, that actually sounds good. Like I like things with a little bit of sugar in them. That's actually totally on par with how I've always been. Like I've always liked off-dry Rieslings. I've always liked dessert wines, so my palate has always tended sweet. So there are lots of apple farms and orchards around here, and a lot of them make fruit wines, which I'd say probably you would like any sommelier would say that these are probably objectively not great wines, but I find them fun and I like to drink them, not because I think that they're like, they're not Richebourg, they're not like fine Bordeaux or fine Burgundy, but they are fun and they're pleasant, and sometimes they just go well with whatever you're like. They're fun to like drink with snacking cheeses or whatever, like, things like that. So that would be my sort of Diet Coke version of wine, if you will.
So you could rock the ciders.
I can definitely rock the ciders. I just think that they're pleasant, and sometimes you just want something that's like lower alcohol content and a little bit of sugar, and you just want to sit out. It's comparable to me to drinking like an Aperol spritz, but I prefer something that's not bitter, and that category is bitter. And everyone, I would say many people like something that's a little bit sparkling, and for me that sort of fulfills that need.
Yeah. Restaurant people like you and I totally relate to a certain style of life. Now, you described yourself as a cellar rat and a restaurant survivor. Could you tell us the difference between the two?
Yeah. So a cellar rat, by definition that we sort of call it in restaurants, is literally somebody who goes down into the cellar and works to sort of learn more about the bottles and spends time stocking bottles and holding bottles and doing like the grunt work. And it's sort of it reads like a derogatory term, but it's actually not meant that way. It's kind of like a badge of honor to be a cellar rat and to be down there and working a entry level job. You learn a lot about the actual wines by doing the work of touching the bottles. I was given that term by a master sommelier whom I worked with at BLT Prime in 2005. As a survivor of restaurants, I sort of felt like I was in the industry for a really long time, and there were great things about it and things that I really learned. Like I learned so much about fine dining and certainly so much about wine. And also there were definitely toxic situations that I found myself in and a lot of hardship, and sort of finding myself on the other side in a world where I could achieve a lot and find success that was divorced from restaurants, but that still leaned into all of the things that I had learned in restaurants. To me, felt like having survived and made it to like the other side of the mountain, I felt like.
Do either one of those identities, cellar rat or restaurant survivor, still linger with you?
I still see myself as like, wine adjacent. I think with the survivorship, for the most part, like on an everyday basis, I think of myself as out of the restaurant industry, and like I don't see myself as like steeped in its trauma. But I will say that there are exceptions. When I was working on the book, I was really surprised by how, because I had to do a lot of like self-reporting and I had to do a lot of fact checking, and like in going back into these memories and in reaching out to some people from my past, I was really shocked by how traumatizing it was to have to kind of relive some of the worst parts of this, of my own past. And I also think that like even sometimes without realizing it, like watching certain things about restaurants, like watching The Bear, for instance, how I'm like, oh God, like that really brings back things that I don't necessarily want to have to relive. Or, wow, there's somebody that, there have been episodes of The Bear, for instance, that have featured people whom I used to work with. And it's like seeing them on television is not necessarily a comfortable experience for me. And in that way, I do feel very much like a survivor insofar as, there is trauma buried in my, 15-year plus relationship with restaurants that doesn't always surface, but when it does, it's somewhat surprising even to me.
A lot of us who grew up in the restaurant world found getting into The Bear a very traumatic beginning experience. Is that something that you did too?
Yeah, I think even surprisingly so. Like, it's not like I didn't know what it was going to be about, but I think when you're sitting there watching it, you're like, oh God, like, it's like those, I think so many of us have had those recurring restaurant dreams, right? Where like, the restaurant is full and you're sat all at once, or the restaurant is full and the ticket machine just won't stop. And it's like, oh my God, like it's going to be 8 p.m. on a Saturday night for the rest of my fucking life. Like that, there are parts of The Bear that feel like that, where it's like you're in that dream and that dream is never going to end, or nightmare, whatever, however you want to describe it.
Exactly.
And even knowing that going into watching The Bear, like there's an element to that where you're like, I'm not sure I was prepared for that. Like, I'm not sure I was prepared to like go through that again. And I think with restaurant work, it's probably always going to feel like that.
Right. I think so. It kind of hangs with you.
Yeah.
Now, Hannah, if your palette had a personality, would it be more punk rock, poetry, or precision?
My palette is probably a little punk rock. I mean, my palette is all over the place, and I think there are certainly days where it's subdued and it's like, it wants to go out for like a really nice, fine meal. And there are days when it's like, just give me a burger. Like, I just want like an In-N-Out burger, animal style, like and it wants what it wants. Like, I can't control it.
Do you have In-N-Out burgers in New England?
We do not. We do not. But that's also what makes them special to me, is that I can only get them on the West Coast. So.
Right. What's a food memory that shaped you, but not in a romantic way?
That's a good question. Like a traumatizing food memory.
So much trauma. This is your trauma dump show. Something gritty, awkward, profound.
When I was working at BLT, I had to, well, we sold steaks, all the time. And we just had to do so many refires. Like it was refire steaks all the time, particularly we used to call them B&T nights, bridge and tunnel.
Right.
And there was something about the filet mignon on Friday and Saturday nights. Everybody would order them, horrible, butterflied, well done. And they would still send them back. They weren't well done enough. And it's still very difficult for me to order. I wouldn't really necessarily order a filet anyway, but to see a filet mignon, there is a triggering thing for me, filet mignon, butterflied, well done. Any steak well done is triggering for me and always has been triggering for me. And gray meat was always kind of even when I was a kid, I wouldn't eat it. I didn't like it. As a very small child, I would not eat gray meat. It was a very triggering thing for me, having a guest order that and then having them refire it and having the kitchen yell at me because, what are these people ordering this for? And it was I didn't order it. Believe me, it wasn't me. I don't want them to eat this either. Just kill it. I don't know. Send it out again.
The customer is always right, except when they order a well-done steak.
And then they are wrong.
Yeah. Tell us, in Cellar Rat, you kind of exposed the underbelly of fine dining, and you got a lot of shit for it from people in various groups, discussion groups, and so on. What is that all about?
Yeah, well, I think the most high-profile place I got shit from it would be the New York Times. They did not seem happy with me. What do I think it's about? I think it was about misogyny, personally. The vast majority of the people who took issue with my book were men, which, I don't think that's an accident. It's interesting. First of all, the whole book, you have to sort of understand, was predicated upon an essay that I wrote for Eater that was nominated for a James Beard Award. And it was really an extension of that book. And the essay got almost no pushback. And this is not to say that I expected the book to get no pushback, because I very clearly did. And I had expected the essay to get pushback also, although we were really careful with a lot of our language when we put the essay out there. And I was freer in the book to kind of cast a wider net and say a lot of the things that I had been reserved and careful not to say in the essay. So I kind of knew that there were going to be people who came for me. The people who came for me were, let's just say it, they were friends with some of the people who I had written about. The reviewer who took me on in the New York Times, quite unethically, was friends with many of the people who I had written about in the book. It's a mystery to me why the New York Times allowed him to review the book in the first place. It was people in power protecting what they had. And I had seen the book, and I continue to see the book, as a feminist response to the things that happen in the industry through my personal experience, through the lens of my personal experience. But it's one person's experience, but it's a very broad, it's speaking for many different people, because I wasn't under an NDA and I had the ability to say these things. And I was in a relatively safe position and remain in a relatively safe position because I continue to be employed, and because people hire me, and because, I wasn't in danger of losing my restaurant job. I could say these things, and I can say these things. And boy, they did not like that. They did not like a feminist take on the restaurant industry and what it does to people. And I continue to believe that strong women speaking out against things is deeply unpopular.
Given that, did you ever see a moment in your restaurant career of true justice in any sort of restaurant setting where someone stood up, spoke out, or changed the game?
Not really. I feel like every time we come very close, that kind of gets ripped away from us. I think often about Mario Batali walking out of a courtroom here in my home city of Boston. There was plenty of evidence against him. There were, people who spoke out on the record in the New York Times and elsewhere and in a courtroom saying that they had not just sexually assaulted him, but they had been raped by him. And in 2017, here in this city, he walked out of a courtroom and went on to live a very lucrative life in Michigan. Is he in restaurants? No. Is he profiting off restaurants? It appears that he is profiting off restaurants. Is he living off of Coach goat cheese and Coach bags, because of the largesse of his wife? He is. Is he still, continuing to live a very lucrative life? It is my understanding that he is, from what I know, based both in the restaurant and travel industries. That is my understanding. So, it does not seem like the people who do these things to other people in restaurants are truly, finding accountability.
Yeah, however, living in shame for the rest of your life is probably not where it's at either.
Sure, but what about the women who came forward? How do they live for the rest of their lives?
Right, right. Now, tell us a few of the misogynistic stories that you encountered personally besides Mario.
I mean, the stuff that I've lived on my own, I mean, I think one good example is what happened to me with Johnny Uzzini. I take some ownership for what happened to me because I put myself in a situation where I wasn't even sure if I was responsible for it. I willingly went home with a person who then, I don't want to give too much away for people who haven't read the book, but I said yes to certain things consensually, and then things happened to me that were non-consensual. And I had gone on the record about this stuff in 2017 for another magazine and then ended up writing a longer story about it. He was given the opportunity to respond the first time that I went on the record in 2017, and he chose not to respond. And when the book came out, he publicly called me a liar. He had the opportunity to respond to my allegations way before, and he never called me a liar those times. On the record, when the book came out, he said he conceded that we had a personal relationship, that we were romantically linked, and then he called me a liar for saying all of the things that I had alleged happened between us in terms of the non-consensual stuff. Now, other people have come out and accused him of untoward behavior and things that were non-consensual. So it's just me. I'm the only one who's lying about him. I'm the one who wrote a book, just me. Or I'm the one who wrote a feminist takedown and he wanted to make me seem like I was an unreliable narrator. I mean, I guess I leave the question up to the reader.
And I have to say that I love the way that you write. It's literary, it's lacerating. You're tough and it comes across. What's your process for balancing the beauty of your words with the brutality of them?
Well, first of all, I come from a fiction background. I got my Master of Fine Arts in Fiction. So I think I come from that literary place. And I'm also returning to fiction after this. I have a novel that's coming out in June. I think that's where that marriage comes from. But I think in terms of the brutality, and I like to think that I'm equally brutal on other people as I am on myself. Although I'm not sure that the reviewers really understood that, but or not all of them.
Right.
But I do feel like the honesty is important. I think it's important to be honest in a memoir about others and about ourselves. About part of what I felt like was important in Cellar Rat was that I didn't let myself off the hook. That the situations that I got into, that I was honest about how I got into them, and that when I did things that were untoward, or that when I did things that were disreputable, when I made mistakes, when I behaved in criminal acts, when I engaged in criminal acts, when I drank too much and put myself in dangerous situations, even if the outcome was somebody else's fault, even if I was, there was non-consensual sexual acts that accompanied those, even if I was fired and it was unfair, but I had gotten myself halfway there. I wanted to concede that I had gotten myself halfway there, that it was my fault, that part of it was my fault. And I feel like if you don't do that work in a memoir, then you're not telling the whole truth.
So true. When you sit down to write, do you have an emotional temperature going on in your head, whether or not it's, rage or tenderness or just exhaustion?
I think it depends on the chapter that I'm working on. I think, a lot of people pigeonhole this book as angry, and I don't think that's necessarily fair. I think that a lot of chapters are not particularly angry, and I don't think that my overall outlook when it comes to this book is angry. I don't think I'm necessarily angry at restaurants. I think that, there are certainly things about restaurants that are justifiably make me angry. But I certainly don't think that the situations about my father, which do take up a considerable amount of real estate in the book, I don't think the primary emotion about that is anger. I did not write this book in order. Other long works that I work on, I do write in order. This book I didn't write in order. I came back to the proposal and I wrote chapters I looked at the proposal and I thought, okay, which chapter like feels like right now is what I should be writing it. And actually the first chapter that I wrote of all of them was chapter 5, which was the chapter about Johnny Uzzini. That's what I submitted with my proposal. So I didn't even go back to that chapter at all. That was the one I wrote first. I submitted it. I sold the book based on that chapter. So, I don't even think of that chapter as a really angry chapter. I just think of that as an emotive chapter. I think there are other chapters that may be more angry, so, I guess do with that what you will. There were other chapters that I wrote later. I wrote chapters about my father far later, which to me feels like maybe the coda of the book wasn't about anger. It was about love. Because we always know, and this is different between authors and journalists, we always know that anything can be taken away in edits. They give you far more permission in writing a book to keep whatever you want. And I am very sort of like, look, if you need to cut it, you can cut it. Like I have worked for magazines for many, many years. I know that sometimes you pick up your magazine and your content looks very different from when you last filed it with your editor. And I am really comfortable with that. And I am very easy to work with in that way. So if you need to change my work a little bit, I'm okay with it as long as it's the best version of you and me together, you and me being you, the editor, and me, the writer. It's a collaborative process.
Right. Sometimes the editors do save us from those whoopsie moments.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And we need to be edited. We need to be reined in. Like, not every single thing I write is like the most genius thing I've ever thought. I think there are plenty of authors who go out there and they think every single thing I write is amazing. I do work as a ghostwriter, and I have some clients who just they do not allow for cuts. And I've had to say, like, you need to let me cut 5,000 words. Don't even look at what the 5,000 words are. Just trust that I understand structure in a way that you may not, because I do this for a living. Let me touch your work, and I promise that it will be better in the end.
And it's true, because when you can polish something up and it becomes gem, it's so worthwhile.
Yeah.
What is it about the restaurant industry that so many people are drawn to, and yet there's so much stuff going on?
Look, I think the restaurant industry is exciting. It's invigorating. It's always moving. One thing I thought I would never be doing is sitting in an office and working a 9 to 5, which is really ironic because even though my work is a writer and it's like my dream job and I wouldn't trade it for anything, I actually do have a very conventional 9 to 5 job. I'm at my desk at 8:30 every morning, and I am here until 5 p.m. and I send emails. There is no more conventional 9 to 5 apart from the fact that my office is steps away from my kitchen. This is the 9 to 5, right? It's just that it's not like in a law office. I was drawn, and I think so many people are drawn to the fact that there's chaos and it's frenetic, and you can sleep late and you can stay up late and you can party and look at all. And if you go to Gramercy Tavern, they'll send you a free cheese plate with Madeira. But actually, in the end, it's sort of a trick, because you think you have all this freedom and you think you have this incredible sort of all of these things that you think you're getting. You're really swapping out other things. You don't really have freedom, and you don't really have a free schedule, because you can't ever get a free Saturday night. You can't ever get a Saturday night off, and you can't ever get you can't ever see your family, and forget about taking a normal vacation, or just your life is very upended and it's very chaotic, and all of the things that you thought you were getting in exchange for one thing just get traded out for something else.
Yeah, think of all the holidays we never got to go out and celebrate on.
Yeah. Think of all the time you miss with your family, and think about all of your friends who were working also their way up some corporate food chain, and now they're living easy and making all this money, and you're like, oh my God, if I had just put my nose to the grindstone back then, it'd be a lot easier now.
Now, what's your take on the current restaurant industry, or the state of the restaurant industry nowadays?
I think things got really rough during the pandemic for so many people. We're still existing within that framework of that post-pandemic hardship. I think, unfortunately, it made it so much easier for large corporations and so much harder for small mom and pop restaurants, and that is bad for all of us. I think corporations in general are probably bad for all of us. I don't know. Like, I don't see like a world where it's great for any of us. Fine dining, as I knew it when I was coming up in restaurants, is really on the decline. I also just think like every time I go out to get to dinner, I'm amazed by how expensive everything is. And it's
Yeah.
necessarily expensive. Product is more expensive, but that is certainly edging out. People are not able to dine the way that I dined when I was coming up. I went to these incredible restaurants and I was able to have these incredible experiences. And I feel very sad that people will not be able to have those experiences anymore.
Right. I mean, you know, sometimes you just have to kind of storybook your meal and say, okay, we have enough money for an app and a glass
Yeah.
of wine,
Or
you
you can
know?
eat out once a month and not once a week.
Yeah. Megacorps have squashed the restaurant industry, like you say, the mom and pops and so on, like the way that Amazon has squashed the mom and pop small businesses all over the world,
Yeah. And
you
it
know?
makes you wonder what it's going to look like 20 years from now. I mean, I do a lot of beat coverage for a local magazine around here with local restaurants, and it's changing really fast. You know, what people are looking for is changing really fast. I'm shocked on a daily basis by what it costs for four people to go out to dinner or
Right.
even lunch. Like, there are no more $50 meals for families. There are almost no meals that a family of four can get for under $100. I don't know how anyone affords it. I really don't. And that's, with a reviewer's take where many of my meals are comped or paid for by a magazine, when I'm working, when I'm doing work. So I really don't know how an average consumer can afford to have that, even as like a relief. We're not even saying like leisure. We're just saying like, God, I can't cook another meal in my house. I'll go crazy. Let's order a pizza. That's $75, you know?
Right. I have to ask you about tipping because all the restaurant professionals and people who have had backgrounds like you always like to know where they're coming from regarding tipping and if it's awkward in any way.
I don't find tipping awkward. I mean, I find it awkward when I'm out with my in-laws and they tip 10 or 15%.
Yikes.
No, I don't find tipping awkward. I think there's a huge debate in the United States about whether we should shift to a tipless model. And my feeling with that is that we can only sustainably do that if employers were to enter a really appropriate contract with their employees where they would actually pay them sustainably. I haven't seen that happen yet, but I'm all on board for them to do that. But we're living in a country where we won't even like cover people's health insurance, so I'm not super optimistic about it.
What do you feel about restaurant owners expecting the public to keep tips coming so they can have their great staffers, and yet there are no other businesses that necessarily rely upon that kind of business model?
Well, I think this is the problem that I have, right? So, like, I do have a problem with restaurant owners being too cheap to make up the difference. But this is capitalism 101. Like, the United States can't, like, decide what it wants. It's like, we want everything. We don't want to pay for anything. Like, we want you to bear the burden, the public, and then, but we also I don't have an answer for it. But the few restaurants that have tried to wrap in the tipping model have failed at it. So
Yeah.
I don't know I mean, I agree with you. I think that like depending on someone else to pay to make up the lost wage is failing as a model also. I think, Keller and the few places that have tried, I think Danny Meyer also tried it to wrap in the service. I mean, Phoebe Damrosch wrote about it in Service Included briefly. They haven't necessarily succeeded. So it's part of a larger issue about how much we're paying our workers.
As a former restaurant owner, a lifelong chef, as I've been all over the place when it comes to restaurants, I never took on that attitude that you, the customer, needs to pay my staff.
Right.
And in all my other businesses that I had that were non-restaurant related, I always paid my staff really well. They hung with me for a long time and we were able to create success. And I never expected the public to give me money and to kind of supplement my income or my staffers.
Yeah. Well, we just have to convince business owners who, and I'm not saying that this applies to you, but I would say that for the most part, people on the business owner side tend to tack conservative slash Republican, and that would be a philosophically, they tend to, they favor like lower taxes. There's sort of like an economic, line in the sand kind of thing. And we have to change the mindset. And I don't know how to do that, particularly in this political moment in time. Not to drive this into a political conversation, but there is sort of like there's a problematic way of thinking, and I don't know how to tackle that. I really don't.
I think you just answered the question that I was thinking about following up with, which is, what's something you never said in an interview because it felt too raw? You're getting there now.
Business owners are Republicans.
Right. Oh, man. Now, if you could write a love letter, Hannah, to one moment of rebellion in your life, what would it say? And that does not include the tongue piercing.
I think, when I look back on like the hardest part of my life, much of which is sort of chronicled in that like 10-year period that is covered through Cellar Rat or whatever, I think that there were times when I wasn't really sure that I was ever going to become successful, and more acutely that I was ever going to become successful at writing, which is the one thing that I ever really wanted to do. And I had like tried all of these other things like writing, like wine, and becoming a sommelier, and eventually I worked in wine distribution, thinking that like, okay, well, if I can't write, there are other things that I'll do that I can be good at, and that will be just fine. I can live like that, like I guess I can survive doing something else. And I would say to myself, like, you're gonna get there. Like you're good enough, and if you just work at it, you're gonna make it, doing the thing that you were always supposed to do, and you just need to hold on.
And you've been true to yourself the whole way through, it appears.
As far as I know.
Do you have any pets?
I have 3. I have 2 dogs and a tortoise. I used to have another tortoise, but R.I.P.
Okay. Sadness. What are their names?
I have one dog. He's sleeping here. Pickle. He's 16. Herbie, a dog. He's a bit of a head case. he's 7. And then I have Gromit. He's a tortoise, and I don't know how old he was because we got him from my husband's boss. He's probably like 16 or 17, and he had a tortoise friend named Wallace, but she sadly perished.
Wow. So you've always been an animal lover, it appears.
Yes, I love dogs. The tortoises were not I love the tortoises, but they were not my choice. They just came home one day. My husband showed up with a bunch of tortoises. He was like, "We have tortoises now."
What do tortoises eat?
Lettuce.
Okay. Well, that's affordable. You can keep them in lettuce all day long.
They're very easy.
I want to talk about motherhood. You have 2 young ones, don't you?
I have a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old. My 8-year-old will be 9 in December.
Wow. And what's it been like, the transition from, maybe the crazy, reckless, but brilliant young Hannah to now the married, responsible one?
Crazy. I have to prioritize parenthood, of course. So, that's a lot. And it's soccer games and birthday parties and family travel over solo travel, and coordinating if my book tour will work with my kids' birthdays. And it's hard and rewarding and hard again. I always wanted to have kids. I had them in my late 30s. There's nothing like it. And 2 things happened at the same time for me, which is to say that my career really took off. And also I had very young children in the pandemic. So it's been a weird ride, and I wouldn't change it for anything, but it has been very strange. And it's been, and I think we're learning at the same time. They're certainly learning. I'm very fortunate in that I get to work from home and set my own schedule and work around them. And I am able to do a thing that my boomer parents did not get to do because they were both full-time attorneys who were never home. And so like I'm home at 3 p.m. every day, and even though I might be in my office, I'm still here. And I can go to all their doctor's appointments, and I can be at the soccer games, and I'm more present in a way that 80s and 90s parents really sort of weren't. I was very much a latchkey kid.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my career is super busy and we're always navigating stuff. And I'm 45 with young children, and I think that's hard too. And they're often telling me to stop working and that I work a lot and that I'm on my phone working all the time. And so there's a lot of push and pull between that. And I think in some ways I empathize with my parents having to choose between two things that you care very much about.
A lot of indies, a lot of people like you who own their own ship are working quite often, almost all the time, more than they would if they were employed by someone else.
Yeah, I think that we find that. And I think I learned how to say no, but there's a tension between, okay, well, it's Saturday and I got an email from my editor. Do I respond? Do I not respond? I do try to set boundaries, and I have long-standing relationships with my editors at this point, and it's certainly cooled off since my career advanced and I don't have to take the shit jobs anymore. But there was a time when if I got a gig on a Saturday and I needed to deal with it immediately, I had to deal with it immediately for fear that I wasn't going to get any other jobs anymore. I don't feel like I'm quite in that position anymore, but there are occasions when if I'm on a reporting job and I have to do the work on a Saturday, I have to do the work on a Saturday.
Right, right. So it sounds like motherhood has really reshaped your entire life. Time, taste, truth, all of those things have been reshaped by you becoming a young mom.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, I'm definitely not eating at the same restaurants, I'll tell you that.
Right. And you're still eating those sweet tarts and the Peeps.
I'm eating theirs. That's the difference. I'm just not buying them for myself.
So you're really looking forward to the real Halloween because they'll come home with pillowcases full of food.
They actually just said to me 2 days ago, they were like, we don't even get to eat all our candy because mom eats it all. So
right.
They're on to me. They're on to me.
And it's only going to get worse, my friend.
I know. They'll figure it out. It's fine. They don't need to eat all that junk. They're still growing. I'm already a full human.
That sounds like a very legit style of thinking.
I think so.
Now, Hannah, you've got a literary thriller coming out in June of next year. Tell us just a little bit about that and whether or not there's emotional residue from Cellar Rat that kind of blended in with your writing.
Yeah. It's called Valley of the Moms. It's going to go on pre-sale this week, which is exciting. The broad brushstrokes of the book is that it's set in New England, and it's a dual POV book set in both in the present and in the past about a woman who is murdered and a husband's quest to find her murderer and the implication that a local parent-teacher organization may be involved in her death. In a wealthy, predominantly white town, if you can picture it. Maybe not my town, but maybe a town set nearby me.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that my town is full of murderers, but I could imagine it. I wasn't influenced by Cellar Rat, but when I was done working on Cellar Rat, I wanted to work on another toothy project. And I knew that I wanted to do something that wasn't a memoir. I wanted to get out of my own life. I wanted to just do something different. And I had gotten into this brouhaha with my own PTO, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny to write about a PTO, but not mine, obviously. And so yeah. I just sort of ran with a little nugget and made it into this idea. And my agents were like, oh, I think it's so funny, So that's how it started. And I obviously greatly exaggerate. Literally no one around here is killing people. That's just, it's made up. But I just thought it would be funny. And I thought it would be somewhat believable because, there is an exaggerated sort of culture around parent-teacher organizations and motherhood and wealth and all. It's really a book about wealthy communities. And so that's what I'm working on. I mentioned I originally got my Master of Fine Arts in Fiction in 2005, and I originally thought I was going to write novels. And this is now 20 years later after getting my MFA. I'm coming back to it, and I think I might do this for a while.
That sounds great. I think Valley of the Moms is going to be really cool.
Yeah, I think so too.
So doing the book tour thing, is that something that you plan out and strategize all yourself as far as your travel and where to go and which book fairs to attend and which book signings you'll want to do?
It's 50-50. Sometimes people reach out to me. I have a publicist. Right now I have an independent publicist and I have two publicists through Little Brown, with my same imprint that I'll be working on with the next book. And we've got a lot of interest from various bookstores. I try to stay within areas where I know I can get people to come out. So New York was very important to me on the last tour. Obviously, New England. I also went to Philadelphia and DC. Just kept places in mind that I felt like I had, community there and people that I knew and I could get good turnout. And then we're sort of, I don't have anything booked yet for the next, but it would be sort of the same, along the same lines. Where do I have networking possibilities? Where can I get people to show up and buy books?
The Blue State Book Tour.
Yeah, probably not going to the Midwest.
Hannah, if your children someday get to read your memoir, what do you hope they're going to understand about you that they don't know now?
Well, they don't get to read that, no.
Oh.
I'm just kidding.
And forever.
I'm just kidding. I think, I think it's useful for them to understand, first of all, because they're boys, how women are treated differently, as insight and also as instruct that like they should not treat women certain ways, and also to see me as a human being and not just as their mother and somebody who grew and formed in her 20s and who had a past and who struggled with certain things and who grew out of them and who learned from mistakes and maybe didn't learn from all of her mistakes and maybe they still see some of those mistakes in me as a mother and who can see me as fallible. I think that's important and valuable, and I don't talk about a lot of these things with them, and maybe someday I will, but I don't now.
Right, like kids, I got something to say.
Yeah, right.
So, Hannah, do you think that in the overall, things are getting better when it comes to the male-female dynamics of the world? I mean, politics, forget about it, but just as far as the way that we get along, boy and girl?
It's like hard to say. I think that people are more receptive to hearing some of these things, but I also think that sometimes when women express, oh, well, this was gendered, or I didn't get this job, I feel that I didn't get this job because I was a woman, or I feel that my opinion wasn't taken seriously because I was a woman. There can be blowback from men that, well, how do you know? Or maybe it was just because you were unqualified, or maybe it was just because of this, sometimes, and this is true for minorities as well. Their microaggressions are everywhere, right? Mm. It's very common to have your opinion not be taken seriously by men or by the opposite side, whomever you happen to be arguing with, because they've never been in your shoes. They've never experienced the repeated loss of a job or the loss of opportunity over and over again, which you yourself know is because you are a woman. You know that you're not being taken seriously because you're a woman, but they don't, because they've never lived that. They're denying your lived experience. And so they feel like they're just sort of setting you straight, but you're the only one who's actually experienced it. And I've had these conversations with my husband where he's like, oh, how do you know? Like, how do you know it's because you're a woman? And it's like, I just know. Like, I don't know how to explain it. I just know. I know when someone is diminishing me for being a woman. I know the difference between someone setting me straight or mansplaining to me. I know that because I've been living it for 45 years. I know the difference between someone speaking to me a certain way because they're a man, or speaking to me a certain way because they just don't like me, which happens a lot. I understand the difference. Is it something that I can articulate? Not always. So do I feel like that there's progress being made? Sometimes. And sometimes I feel like I'm in the same exact place as I was 10 years ago. Yeah.
Do you ever think that somewhere down the line it's going to become equal, or will it flip-flop ever to where women are running the show in every which way?
Sometimes I feel really hopeful and sometimes I feel depressed about it. Like it's not easy to keep seeing women come close to being president, even if they're not the greatest fit for the job. You still see women coming close and then having it taken away from you. You see things like, Roe v. Wade being reversed when it's been the law of the land for your entire life. And you think to yourself, wow, like I had a right, when I was, for my whole life. And now that right has been stripped away. So that certainly doesn't make me feel great about being a woman in modern society. What am I supposed to tell my kids?
Right.
That's not, to me, that's not progress. That's like moving in the opposite direction. And so, do I believe that, like, the arc of justice is long and, eventually moves in the correct direction, to bastardize a quote by Martin Luther King Jr.? Yeah, I guess, but it's hard to see it when you're in the thick of it.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's really difficult to have rights legislated away.
I feel like this was really good, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, this was fun. I really appreciate you coming in and hanging with me on 50 Tastes of Grey.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.